They say there are pacts that can never be broken. She learned that far too late, because the price of her desire was her body, her mind, and her soul. Sometimes, hell doesn't arrive with fire and screams. It comes quietly, with a promise that seems harmless, and ends up chaining you forever. The woman in this story wasn't a witch, nor a fanatic. She was a desperate woman. And it was that desperation that opened the door to the devil himself. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories based on real events, those where the darkness feels closer than we imagine, I invite you to subscribe and leave a like. It helps me a lot with the algorithm and allows me to keep bringing you more stories like this one. Stay until the end, because what you're about to hear today will make you question whether deals with the devil are just legends or warnings disguised as stories. The story you're about to hear was told by a tourist, a man traveling alone through Mexico, exploring small towns and mountains. His name doesn't matter, but he says everything began during a hiking trip in the town of El Valle in San Luis Potosí. After a long day walking through the mountains, he stopped at a small countryside restaurant, one of those places where the smell of wood and corn fills the air. That's where he met an old woman, Doña Eugenia Quintero, a kind-faced lady, but with eyes that hid something he couldn't quite understand. Curious, and being a lover of the paranormal, the tourist asked her about the local legends. She looked at him for a long moment, then said in a tired voice, "Here, young man, witches are real. The Nahuales too. But the worst of all is that the devil himself lives in the mountains." She told him that many sorcerers go up there at night to ask for favors, for their clients or for themselves. That when darkness falls, you can sometimes hear footsteps on the dry ground and a metallic sound, like hooves striking the stones of the path. That, she said, was the warning. The moment to shut doors, turn off the lights, and stay completely silent. Because if the devil noticed your presence, he would knock on your door and with a deep voice ask, "What do you want?" Doña Eugenia began her story staring into the void, as if the images were still alive in her head. She said it all started when she was only 11 years old. Her mother had died in a strange accident, and her father, not long after, was bitten by a snake while working in the fields. So she was left under the care of her older sister, a young, beautiful woman who ran a small tavern in town. That's where they met a mysterious man, a quiet customer, wearing old clothes and a deep gaze, who always sat in the same corner, watching her sister serve drinks with a strange mix of desire and devotion. Over time, the man began to visit more often, bringing food, money, and promises of a better life. Until one afternoon, the sister told Eugenia they would be moving in with him, to a house far away, closer to the mountains. For Eugenia, the change was overwhelming. The house was large but old, filled with wooden crosses and strange carved symbols she didn't understand. The man, though polite, had something about him that deeply unsettled her. The way he talked to the fire, left food on the table even when no one else was there, and disappeared for hours into the night. It was like the house was breathing, Eugenia recalled with a trembling voice. And I felt that someone else lived with us, even if I couldn't see them. Despite his ragged appearance, the man was surprisingly respectful with both sisters. He even taught them to read and write. Something almost impossible in that remote mountain town. His presence commanded silence. He wasn't tall or strong, but there was something in his energy that made you lower your voice without knowing why. He owned sugarcane and bean fields and often disappeared for days, claiming he was selling the harvest in other regions. But one afternoon, he came back different. Eugenia was cleaning the garden when she saw him arrive in a hurry, pale, nervous, his eyes wide open. Without saying a word, he entered a room where the women were strictly forbidden to go. Curiosity got the better of fear. Eugenia followed him silently, peeking through a small crack in the door. Inside, the man was frantically searching through old books until he found one, the biggest of all. Its cover was a dark, blood-red color that seemed to absorb the light around it. He opened it and began whispering strange words that made the air in the room turn heavy and thick. When he finished, he slammed it shut and locked it inside a wooden chest. She saw him take out several odd objects: small jars, carved figures, and a handful of black soil. Then he locked the door, the key hanging from the chain around his neck, and left without a word. That night was darker than usual. From her window, Eugenia saw him walking toward the fields, carrying something over his shoulder wrapped in a sack. He stopped by the old well, the one that was always locked, and threw the sack inside. The thud echoed deep and metallic, as if it had hit more than just water. Days later, when he and her sister went to town, Eugenia was left alone. The forbidden room called to her. She grabbed a metal rod, forced the lock, and with a faint click, the door opened. Inside, the smell of incense and damp earth filled the air. Strange objects lined every surface: bottles of dark liquid, bones, black feathers, and in the center, a huge book bound in reddish leather, so tight it seemed to breathe. She opened it. There was no title, only pages filled with symbols, circles, and grotesque drawings. Human bodies surrounded by marks, animals with human faces, and prayers written backward. Some pages described how to bind a soul. Others spoke of sacrifices, offering something loved, blood, beauty, or companionship, in exchange for power or fortune. And then, one page froze her completely. A ritual that required three things in exchange for eternal prosperity: silence, obedience, and a sacrifice. That night, she understood the truth. The man's sudden wealth, his secret trips, her sister's blind devotion, none of it was coincidence. He had made a pact, and the devil's debts, sooner or later, are always collected. Years later, when the man fell sick and helpless, the sister took over his work. She locked herself in that same room for hours, fed the well with dead animal flesh, and muttered to herself about keeping the blessings. Until one day her legs stopped working. Her eyes turned hollow, her body weak, and she began to whisper over and over, "He's coming for me. My little goat no longer wants the meat. He's coming for me." Eugenia, exhausted and angry, cared for her every day. Until one night, overwhelmed with hatred, she shouted, "I hope the devil takes you too." That night, a goat's bleating echoed through the house. Eugenia opened the door and saw it, a small black goat staring straight at her. It ran toward the old well. For the first time in years, the well was uncovered. The goat jumped in, and from the depths came not just the sound of its fall, but a deep, inhuman growl. Something ancient, something waiting. Years passed. The sister eventually died, and Eugenia was left with nothing but debts and a cursed house. Desperate, she decided to try the ritual herself. She didn't have the book, but she remembered the words. That night, she went to the cave they called La Cuevita and began to recite the phrases from memory. At first, Nothing happened. Then, faint bells began to ring, each one closer than the last. From the shadows emerged a massive black goat, its eyes glowing like burning coal. It stood on its hind legs and said, "Kill her." Eugenia froze. When the creature saw that she wouldn't do it, it laughed, a deep, mocking laugh. Then turned around and walked away on two legs, disappearing into the night. Years later, she survived by selling homemade food to passing travelers. When the tourist followed her to her home, he could feel the heaviness of the place, even before entering. The windows were sealed shut, the air thick and humid, and in the kitchen, a woman with indigenous features was silently making tamales, indifferent to their presence. There were no animals, none at all, which, in a countryside home, was deeply unnatural. Eugenia led him to a small shack behind the house, tied shut with rusty wires. When she finally opened the door, a wave of flies rushed out, and the stench hit him like a wall. Inside sat an old woman in a wheelchair, legless, eyeless, her face pale and half decayed. Eugenia entered calmly, prepared some food, and began to feed her. "She lost her legs to diabetes," she said quietly. Then she cut out her own eyes, her tongue, and her ears. The tourist could barely breathe. Eugenia smiled faintly. "She's calmer now," she continued. "She likes her little goat. I keep it here to keep her company." From the shadows came a low sound, the scraping of hooves, and a wet, heavy breath. The tourist froze. A black goat emerged from the darkness, its eyes two bottomless pits. Eugenia chuckled softly. "She pets him sometimes," she said. "It soothes her. She says one day she'll join him. The man couldn't take it anymore. He ran out of that house, but as he walked up the hill, he swore he could still hear the bleating of the goat, followed by laughter. A laughter that didn't sound human." Eugenia kept living her life, selling her food to whoever passed by, as if nothing had ever happened. The tourist, however, never returned. If you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe for more stories the world prefers to keep silent. Because here, what you'll hear could happen to you too.